Thank you very much. Good morning. I hope you're in good mood. Are you? Because this is what we'll need. We're in a deadly race between politics and technology, says Peter Thiel. And in fact, I will show you this is true. Suppose we wanted to rule the world. How could we do this? Well, we always say knowledge is power, right? So we would get all the information, all the data of the world, if we could. People go shopping, no matter whether they shop in the internet or in a real shop. If they move, they leave traces, digital traces, social contacts, the files you produce, and the cloud is collecting all this kind of information. Your Gmail accounts, your ebook reader. It records basically how much time you spend on each page, what you mark, and all this. Google records what you search for. Apple records what you're saying. YouTube records what you're watching. And Google Glass will see what you see. Gaming stations see what happens in your living room. And in fact, we're also collecting your fingerprints and your biological data. Well, so can we know everything? Can we map the world with all that data that is now becoming available? Big data. It seems like a possibility, right? So we can take, for example, all the photographs that people take as tourists, upload them to the web, put them together, like the photographs of all these people shown in red, pointing cameras to these black points. Now, if we put these photographs together, then we'll get a 3D representation of the Colosseum or any other frequently visited place in the world. We don't even have to leave the desk at home for this. We can get the world into our living room. And there are companies such as Recorded Future who claim that we're pretty predictable. About 90% of what we do, they believe they can predict because we have regular routines. They know what you do on Monday morning, when you're spending your time in the sports club, when you go shopping, when you meet what kinds of friends. So can we build a crystal ball that sees everything that happens in the world in real time? And in fact, the military is working on this. This is something reported about a US project. And of course, not only the military is working on this, also companies are working on this. For example, Google. And so the question comes up, will Google be God? Well, they're working on it. They're working on omnipresence. With the Google Loon project, they're trying to be present everywhere in the world, to get all your digital traces. With other projects, such as Google Search, Google Glass, Google Nest, they're trying to know what you do in any situation of your life. So omniscience would be basically what they're aiming for, and omnipotence too. And we'll get into this in more detail later on. They're also working on superintelligence, to have machines that would be smarter than you. And not only this, they also have projects to work on your health. They want to kill death, basically. They want to eliminate, eradicate every disease on Earth, so you would live forever. So they want to be the emperor over life and death too. So is Google God? At least they're pretty ambitious, right? there's nothing wrong about being ambitious. The question is, what will be the implications for us? I think they're aiming high. They're aiming to control the world. And let's see how it would work out. So with all that information that's now becoming available, could the world be ruled as if there was a wise king or a benevolent dictator? In fact, Google is working on this. They want to reprogram the state. So the question is, could society be run like a giant machine? If we wanted to do this, we needed to know all those elements, how they interact, and how we can manipulate them. And in my new book, The Automation of Society is Next, I'm reflecting about the possibility of this and the implications. In fact, the idea is quite old, decades old. In the 70s already, Chile was working on a third political model besides communism and capitalism, the cybernetic society, an idea that goes back to Norbert Wiener. And so what they did is basically they asked all the factories to report their production data. And they gave feedback. They told them, you need to produce more of this and less of that product. And that was actually pretty efficient. There was a general strike, and they managed to keep up social order during that situation. But nevertheless, the government came to an abrupt end on September 11, 1973, when Salvador Allende committed suicide because the CIA interfered with that country. They didn't want to have what they considered to be a new form of communism. We didn't hear for a long time about cybernetic societies, but they still exist. In fact, they have been greatly advanced. Singapore, for example, considers itself as a social laboratory. And in fact, in the meantime, we don't only have data about production, we have data about you. That means the human factor that used to be unpredictable is now being figured in. You're part of this giant machine. You're being controlled. And I will tell you how this works. So we've read recently about the China Brain Project. There are other brain projects throughout the world, in the US, in Switzerland, and elsewhere. They have different aims and scopes. That brain project is using the Baidu data. Baidu is the equivalent of Google in China. And Baidu invited the military to help them basically in this project where they would use personal data to learn about what everyone does, why he or she does it, and how these people can be manipulated. So they built digital doubles of everyone to predict what everyone would do. And this is being done with deep learning technology. They're building models of you. And then they're deciding for you using that representative. But not only this, they're manipulating the choices of people. And the question is, how can you do this? Well, you would have to be able to steer people's attention. And that can be done with personalized information. Whenever you Google, you'll get your own personalized results. Whenever you go to Facebook, whenever you book a hotel room, whenever you book a flight, you use recommender machines. All of that is tailored to you to steer your attention and make you do certain kinds of things. Of course, you wouldn't always do this, but in many cases, and in increasingly many cases, and you would think it has been your choice, but in fact, that choice has been triggered by others. You're remotely controlled in many cases, and you don't even notice it. And so, what kind of science is behind this? It's the science of behaviorism. And it goes back to Skinner. Skinner has built these famous Skinner boxes. He put all sorts of animals in there, mice, rats, pigeons, dogs. He provided rewards such as food and punishment such as electrical shocks to make them do certain kind of things. They conditioned these animals. And now we are the experimental subjects. Now Google and Facebook and other companies are experimenting with us. Millions of times every day, they're checking out how we respond to certain kind of stimuli, how we can be made to do certain kind of things. I'm not making this up, this is happening. So our Skinner box is the filter bubble, which is built around us, which limits what we can see. This is kind of a thought prison in the sense that it's built around us, so it would steer our attention. And that kind of technology is not only interesting for personalized advertisement, to make you buy certain products, maybe at higher prices than you would have to, but it's also interesting for politics, of course, right? If you're a politician, you would like to steer the people, their opinions, and what they vote. And in fact, with this technology, it's possible, to some extent, to astonishingly great extent. And then the question is, would we be punished too, as in the Skinner box? Well, probably, because nudging would not be enough to have us behave in a healthy way, to take care of the environment, to reduce CO2 emissions to the extent it would be needed. And so personalized pricing would be introduced to reward and punish us. And not only this, a citizen score would come too. This is happening already in China. So whatever you do in China gives you plus or minus points. Whatever you buy, whether you pay back your loan in time or not, what you click in the internet, and whether this is politically favorable for the government or not, that determines basically your score. And not only what you click, but also what your friends click. And your score would determine the kinds of jobs that you can get, the rates you have to pay for your loans, and whether you get a travel visa to other countries. This is the plan. And the question is, would it just stay in China? Would it come to us too? In fact, it's already in front of the door. The airport security systems are using a similar approach. Of course, Schufa and banks, when they assess your credibility too, right? So what makes you suspicious at an airport? Everything that lets you behave in a non-average way. If you moan, if you laugh, if you comb your hair, yeah, sorry, this is not average behavior, not normal behavior. You're not supposed to do this if you don't want to be suspicious. This is the kind of system that we'll have. It doesn't work well, by the way, but still it's in use. And we'll have predictive policing. So people may be arrested based on risks before they've done anything, before they committed a crime, and also the time they have to spend in prison may depend on predictions. That means algorithms will determine your future. And these algorithms will consider what your friends do. So you have to be very careful about the choice of your friends, and also your Facebook friends. And the power of this system is being amplified also by the power of artificial intelligence. Now, within a couple of years, experts expect that computers would overtake the capacity of human brains. maybe one day the capacity of all human brains. I'm not so sure about that, to be honest, but let's see. We know they're already the better chess players. Since a few days, also the better Go players. So they crack the last bastions of human intelligence increasingly. They're better workers in many areas, and maybe, or most likely, better drivers too. They're better in answering questions because they can overlook much more knowledge. They might be better doctors, actually, maybe better scientists too in future. Robots now become more and more capable and sophisticated, right? They can play table tennis, for example, but do all sorts of things, in fact. Well, they could build other robots too, right? So they could reproduce. They could build maybe smarter robots, so they could evolve. And they would evolve much faster than humans. I could go on, but basically you see already, I believe we will most likely lose control. And also because of cybercrime. Cybercrime is exploding exponentially. Right now it costs us $3 trillion a year. And there is no company, no institution that hasn't been hacked, including the American military, the Pentagon, the White House, the Bundestag. So there is no secure system, a powerful system to control the people of a country would be hacked sooner or later by organized criminals, by extremists. I don't believe this. Terrorists, extremists, and organized criminals would hack the system. And that is actually the implication. If you have the most powerful artificial intelligence system, what happens basically if you have the most powerful AI system in the world, you can control the other AI systems because AI systems live on information that they get. And in the same way as humans can be manipulated through information, AI systems could be manipulated through information too. So basically, if we had a system to control the population in this country, then there might be a government that has a more powerful AI system that controls that AI system of our government, and this way can control us. But this is not the only problem. In fact, AI will make many of us unemployed. About 50% of today's jobs will be gone in 10 to 20 years. Of course, there will be new jobs, but the question is how many of them? Well, this is a serious issue because in some countries we already have unemployment rates of more than 50% among young people. Like in Greece, in Spain, it's not clear whether this is ever going to be better. And that, of course, is creating problems for social peace. It's creating social and political instability. Right now, there are just 4 countries in which young people can still get easily jobs. So we are in a fundamental transformation of our society. We are actually stepping into a new era, a digital era. We've had similar situations before. We are coming from an agricultural society that was turned into an industrial society through the invention of steam engines and other machines. And from there, society was transformed into a service society. Now, the next transformation will lead us into the digital society. The problem of these transformations, however, is they're never smooth. They're highly disruptive. So in the past, we've always seen financial and economic crisis. We've seen revolutions and wars. Unfortunately, we've seen a financial and economic crisis already. Hopefully, we will not see a war that might result out of all this huge unemployment that nobody will want to pay for or will be able to pay for. So even though basically we have more data than ever, better technology than ever, better science than ever, we might head into a time where we're losing control and where basically we believe there are not enough resources for everyone. We could lose everything we built over hundreds of years: self-determination, human dignity, assumed innocence, fairness and justice, pursuit of happiness, pluralism, democracy, participation, security, peace, and jobs. And what concerns me is that this is not just theoretical. I mean, people are talking about this. Tony Blair asks, is democracy dead? We see that elsewhere too. Ist die Demokratie ein Auslaufmodell? And this says already, die Demokratie is ein Auslaufmodell. And in fact, now we are seeing this, right? In Poland, for example, freedom of press and the constitutional court are basically demolished. In Turkey, an appeal for peace that has been launched by scientists has been considered to be punished. And also in France, even UN experts are now criticizing actually the mass surveillance that's happening there. So we are in this process of losing democracy if we don't stand up and prevent this, because the idea is that with all this data we could now optimize the world and rule it like a benevolent dictator, and democracy would be in the way of optimizing the world. However, there is no such thing, such a benevolent dictator. And why is this? Because there's no science that can tell us actually what is the goal function that we should optimize. Should it be GDP per capita or sustainability? Should it be power or peace? Should it be happiness or should it be life expectancy? Or what else should it be? Nobody can tell us. And that's why we have pluralism, to hedge us for the risks of life. Everyone is trying to find the best solution, and that has been a good principle. The other thing is, a benevolent dictator might have good intentions, but most likely it would turn bad. We've seen that in the Stanford prison experiment. So what has been done there, healthy students like you have been taken, normal, psychologically normal students, they've been divided into people playing prisoners and people playing guards. The prisoners didn't do anything bad. And the experiment should have lasted for 3 weeks. After 1 week, this experiment had to be stopped because this experiment totally got out of control because of the power imbalance that has been imposed on the students. Basically, what happened is scenes like in Abu Ghraib. And so the idea that this should be the future of our society, where now a computer decides what everyone should do, what would be the place of you, this is a totalitarian society. Let's see what Apple thinks about 1984.
For the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests, obeying contradictory thoughts. Our unification of thoughts is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
Unfortunately, it's much worse than that. So, I really recommend you, stand up for democracy. Basic democracy is one of the best inventions that has ever been made, and it's not outdated at all. I'll now show you that all the ideology that's behind this big data paradigm is highly flawed. Society is not a big machine. It cannot be steered like a car. And the reason is that there are interactions not only between cars that would produce unpredictable and uncontrollable outcomes that nobody wants, such as these phantom traffic jams. Couldn't even prevent it if you could read all of your thoughts. Now, also the same applies to all other systems. In fact, Google claims to build paradise on Earth, but it doesn't work out. Their self-driving cars are not always doing what they should. And in fact, there was recently a warning that these cars would produce accidents if drivers wouldn't step in certain kinds of situations. Google's Blue Trends has been seen as a prime example for this great success of big data analytics. Now we know, actually, it's not working so well. Here's another example, 23andMe, a company that is loosely associated with Google, collecting genetic data about people. This product has been forbidden by the American authorities, something that doesn't really happen very often, because they thought it was not a serious product. I would even claim Google doesn't really fully understand big data, what it can do and what it can't do. And you would think if they are able to build a better world, then San Francisco should be the best town on earth, right? But in fact, if you look at the most livable cities in the world, this is what you see. All the big IT nations are not among those nations. So something must be wrong with this big data paradigm. And in fact, big data is not a universal tool to understand and govern the world. We can see patterns, but it wouldn't necessarily explain how they come about. It's like looking in the sky and you believe there are some patterns, but are they meaningful? In fact, the more data you collect, the more patterns you will see, but most of them will be random and not meaningful. Like this one, like number of serial killers as a function of chocolate consumption. If that were true, we would be living very dangerous here in Switzerland. We would have to put all those people who eat a lot of chocolate in prison because they might be too dangerous for our society. Or take this example from Kaggle, a famous big data company. So they came to the conclusion that orange cars were generally more reliable. If you're a scientist, you would immediately say, this must be bullshit, right? There is no explanation for this. So this is not scientific. And also classification errors will happen. So if you want to distinguish between good and bad risks, in an insurance company, in a bank, but also when you're working for the police or secret service, you want to distinguish between terrorists and good people. It's not so easy to distinguish, actually. For every one terrorist that is really a terrorist, they would have 100 or 1,000 suspects on their list that are completely innocent because the procedures that they use are not perfect. And big data can discriminate people. So suppose we have to pay health insurance based on what we eat, right? Then for sure, men and women would pay different rates. Christians, Muslims, and Jews would pay different rates. And we wouldn't want this to happen, right? So don't believe in this. We are not just a number. We are people, right? And we shouldn't be dictated by numbers, and even more so by numbers that we don't fully understand, because otherwise we will head towards an age that we've seen in the past, a really totalitarian age that disrespects people and will do terrible things to people. There are actually reasons why the wise king would fail to take wise decisions. And this has to do actually with the IT revolution itself. So processing power is exploding, it's doubling every 18 months, but data volume is exploding even faster. Doubling every 12 months, will be every 12 hours, some years in future. So the gap between the data we have and the data we process will be ever bigger. And that means we can see everything, but we need to know where to look. And so that produces a flashlight effect. In many cases, we would overlook the important things, such as most people haven't seen the financial crisis coming. Most people didn't expect the Arab Spring. The Ukrainian crisis came as a surprise. Spreading of Ebola. These are just some examples. So certainly the data were there, but nobody paid attention to them, right? So big data doesn't automatically solve all the problems. And even worse, systemic complexity is exploding even faster than data as we go on networking the world. And that creates complexity, that creates lots of top-down control and requires a completely new paradigm. In fact, if you listen to the World Economic Forum speakers, then I think this is basically what they concluded, that we're seeing a loss of control in the world, and that has to do with complexity. As we know from prediction of weather, there are limits of predictability that doesn't have to do with the amount of data we have, but with the physics behind it, the physics of turbulence, chaos theory, and so on. And basically, the unsolved problems that we have today are all related to systemic instability. Tragedies of the commons. It would be good if people cooperated, but cooperation in many cases isn't stable, and that's why you end up with overfishing and climate change and these kind of things. Supply chains might be unstable. The entire economy might be unstable. All systemic instability. People have the best intentions, the best tools, the best data, but they're losing control because the system is unstable. Crime, too, unstable phenomenon. Crowd disasters, conflicts, revolutions, wars, all of that is related to a phenomenon that we call cascading effects. Maybe we can turn up the noise a bit. So due to these cascading effects, a single local perturbation can mess up the entire system, in fact, the entire world, as we've seen that in the financial crisis. So Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, and as a result, actually, hundreds of other banks went bankrupt too. Cascading effect, yeah? Wrongly designed system. Cost us hundreds of billions of dollars. Or take this other example that extended over many years too. Started with September 11. Then wars were started in Afghanistan, in Iraq. Those wars didn't end as expected. Instead, international tension spread. The Arab Spring broke out. We have this terrible situation in Syria. IS is a big problem to us. Terrorism results from this, and the refugee crisis. Right? All of that is connected with each other. A huge cascading effect, and it might end in a third world war even. So we need to understand these systems better. Our society is at a crossroad. If we don't pay attention, if we go on as before, we'll end up on path A. Will be a disaster. So we really need to come up with a new paradigm, and that means ethical IT innovation. So now, how to free the world with big data. That can be done too. In fact, we've been working on a project called Future ICT, and it had a number of ideas, and the most important component is really participation of the people. And we are now working on this nervous net project that is actually trying to enable people to take better decisions and give them more opportunities also on the job market. So, to put it in context, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And you should be doing this, right? That's why you're here. So let's see how we can understand the future better by looking into the past. So if you're in Silicon Valley, go to this computer history museum, and then you'll see the first computers. And in fact, IBM chief Watson saw there would be maybe a world market for 5 computers. Of course, he was totally wrong. But then what happened is, computers were networked, first in a military network, then this network was opened, the internet was created, then the World Wide Web was invented by Tim Berners-Lee, an HTTP protocol that basically turned the internet into something that could be used by non-experts. And by this, it opened up the opportunity for multi-billion-dollar markets. What happened next is social media were created, so the internet came nearer. It included us as nodes that provide data, but also process data. We are part of this huge information processing network. We're being used in this context too. And now what happens is things are also connected to this internet. The Internet of Things is being created. And we put sensors to these things. So we can give them senses. We can also give them artificial intelligence. We can give them a life in a sense. Right? That is an absolutely amazing opportunity. We can make the world intelligent. And in fact, we can start with our smartphone. Every smartphone contains about 15 sensors. Most of the time, we're not using them actively, but we could. We could open them up. We could actually create together a global measurement system. The only point is we'd like to have a system that we can trust, a system that doesn't spy on us, a system that we can control. And in fact, this is what we are doing. We're giving this opportunity to decide by yourself what sensors you would open, whether you would use the data just for yourself, for smart home applications, for example, or whether you would share this data with others. And the idea is to run this Internet of Things as a citizen web. Right? All together, control it together, use it together. And the question, what can we do with such a system? Well, I can do real-time measurement, in particular of externalities, and this is quite useful, and measured by, for example, acceleration. And now, if all our smartphones would start shaking at the same time, there would most likely be an earthquake, and we wanted our friends to be warned so they can get to a safe place quickly. So with all that information about the world, we can create greater awareness. We can measure things such as social capital, reputation, trust, and so on, that we can't see, but are important for our society. We can map crises, we can map noise, we can map resources and who uses them. In fact, we are working on a platform to do this called Swarm Pulse, and if you're a good programmer, then please join in. Real-time feedback is even a greater opportunity because that allows us to support self-organization in systems. So systems would create certain kind of properties and functions by themselves, like magic, but in a bottom-up way, right? So we could have these feedbacks on different levels, up to the societal level, but the difference is here it would not be decided from the top down to the single person what everyone would have to do. Everyone could come in with own ideas and innovations and good solutions. And basically, to create these feedbacks, you would need to build a multidimensional incentive and value exchange system. Sometimes I call it multidimensional finance. And then what we can do is we can make the system increase positive externalities, reduce negative ones, and ensure fair compensation. And this way, we'll do something for a more efficient use of resources, we'll take more care about the environment and about other people. So the system will improve by itself by considering the external effects of interactions. And here is an application example. So what I'm showing you here is a simulation of this stop-and-go traffic that nerves us every day, and shows you that we understand the process, that we can simulate it in a computer. And of course, the goal is to get rid of it, right? So in order to see what is the reason for this stop-and-go traffic, we'll now turn this car into a helicopter. I'm sure you would like to have such a car too. I'm the first one to have it. And you can see now, there are a few cars that try to get on the freeway. They produce small disruptions. These disruptions are amplified, and that causes the stop-and-go traffic. Now, what we can do is we can equip, say, 30% of those cars with radar sensors that measure the distance and relative velocity, and that the cars drive automatically, but in a way that is smarter than humans can do. And what you're now seeing is that we can actually get rid of this traffic jam by changing the interaction mechanism. So we change the outcome of self-organization by changing the interactions in the system. And in the same way, can we do this actually for urban traffic? So we came up with the concept of a self-organized traffic light control, where the traffic flows control the traffic lights, rather than the other way around as we have it today. And that makes traffic light control much more flexible and efficient. So it's really good for all the participants and for the environment too. 30 to 40% of improvements, huge. Smart grids, another example where decentralized control approaches are getting more and more important. And Industry 4.0. Now products can talk to the machines what they should do with them. They could also talk to the other products and tell, oh, I'm actually in a hurry, so please let me overtake, right? I mean, now products are getting smart. All of this becomes possible, and we can build digital assistants that help us to take better decisions, to be more successful in all sorts of situations, and to overcome cultural barriers. In fact, you might have an app on your smartphone that allows you to talk to your app in German or English, and on the other side will be translated into Spanish, Japanese, Chinese, or whatever. So this is amazing, and we'll have apps in future that help us to understand other cultures and also to use the underlying success principles of all these cultures, because there are thousands of tricks that cultures are built on. Most of them we don't explicitly know, but we could actually reveal them and make them usable, make them operationable. So we can recombine all those success principles of all the cultures in the world to produce more successful systems. And so in order to get there, we could build something like a Culturepedia, where we collect all those success principles and make them explicit. I call it also the Cultural Genome Project. And it makes us clear that diversity is really important to be more successful in future, if we just learn how to turn it into an advantage. So this is really coming down to creating collective intelligence. We need to learn to build platforms that help us to bring the best ideas of many minds together, and also artificial intelligence. So it would be really networks of smart agents. And the important point over here is really that not the best single strategy wins, but the combination of strategy. That means diversity is really winning in a complex world. So for this we need to build online deliberation platforms, and that would be really important also for modern governments to involve the citizens and their knowledge locally. And that comes down to the challenge to build digital democracy. So how to now create jobs and earn money in the future? Well, of course, information and knowledge production will be important, creative work, much more important, personalized products, co-creation. With big data and artificial intelligence, we'll see a lot of rationalization happen, and that takes away all the old jobs, as I said before. And so we have basically rebuilt 50% of our economy. How would that look like? And that would be the digital economy, the immaterial economy in a sense. It's built on data, on information, on knowledge, on wisdom, and actually built on different kinds of principles. Co-creation will be particularly important over here. Because actually sharing information can make it more valuable. So that's why co-creation is such a promising principle. And so the idea is really built on creating an ecosystem of ideas, of information, of innovation and production. So if we have enough interoperability, basically, people can take existing products and services and combine them to build new products and services, and that would allow for an exponential innovation rather than the linear innovation that we had in the past. It's really of high importance to recognize that this digital economy is not a zero-sum game. It's to be richer and more successful, you don't have to take away something from somebody else, as that was the case in the material economy, because materials are limited, but information is not. You can reproduce information as often as you like. You can use it in a zillion different ways. So there are unlimited possibilities if we just create the right framework for this digital economy. And this is what we need to do, right? So you could be doing this, right? You could build a new financial and economic system. We should start that today, in fact. And it's amazing that this is now becoming possible. We can now actually turn bits and bytes into real value. Bitcoin has shown this. It's amazing. And the reason is, in fact, the financial system is nothing else than a coordination mechanism. But of course, we could come up with better coordination mechanisms. So as we reinvent products and services, and why not reinvent money? Financial system, the economy, our society, it will happen anyway. It's better you do it than that somebody else do it. And so I believe we can basically go from this trickle-down economy and build an evaporation kind of economy that will create prosperity for everyone. So it would turn this desert, this digital desert where there are just a few big IT giants, into something like a digital rainforest where there's abundance for everyone. There's place for individuals, for small, medium-sized companies, and for giant companies. Those biggest trees are much bigger than the palm trees, right? So there are opportunities for everyone. We just need to create the right framework. So let's do this together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Helbing, for this really inspiring presentation. And we have maybe 5 minutes for questions. We have the box, you're used to it already. So who would like it and ask a question to our keynote speaker? Don't be shy.
Don't be scared. Big Brother's watching you, but never mind.
Yeah, very encouraging. We have one brave person.
So you talked about the Google Looms earlier, and you used them as an example for how Google can observe us all the time. But meanwhile, these Google Looms can also help us to detect, let's say, natural catastrophes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely. Don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-Google, right? So we just need to be aware of what everybody has in mind in order to figure out a strategy that would serve our interests, right? And in fact, yeah, there are a lot of great services that Google provides us with, and it helps us in disaster situations too. Just the question is, how can we turn it into an even better system, right? And I think giving people more opportunities and choices would turn it into a better system. If I could run my own search algorithm on their data, that would serve me a lot, because then I could look at the world from different perspectives and get a much better picture, right? So there are simple ways actually to improve the system, to help us and also to help Google to make even bigger business, in fact, right? But it would basically eliminate the totalitarian potential if we could choose the algorithms. Yeah.
Is the idea that instead of looking at society as a machine that can be steered and predicted and controlled, we should acknowledge the interconnectedness and complexity and need for human creativity to work together with these systems.
Absolutely, yes.
Please, the box goes over here.
You talked about how we can use algorithms to process data, and in the second part of your talk on how we can use that to free our society. But if we focus on artificial intelligence, how can we as individuals use that in the future to make our society more free?
Okay, very good question. And in fact, Elon Musk has come up with one possible answer. He started this open AI initiative with this goal to make artificial intelligence available for everyone and have it work for us rather than control us. And in fact, I believe in future we'll have a network of human and artificial intelligence that work together according to this collective intelligence paradigm. We need to create the framework that allows for this seamless cooperation. So the goal is human-machine symbiosis, right? And I think there is a paradigm shift in this direction right now. I hope it comes in time. Yeah, but these digital assistants that I was talking about, they are, in many cases, artificial intelligence systems that would help us. Siri, for example, right? Just again, in this case, Apple determines what Siri does and determines the goals and the principles according to which Siri works. So if we would get to a point where we could teach Siri how we would want it to work for us, that would be an even better Siri, right? So this is what we want to have.
Time for one more question. You will have more time to ask questions during the panel discussions when you have heard all the speakers, but we have now time for one more question. I'm giving it to you.
So, did I understand it correctly that in your ideal world there wouldn't be any copyright laws? No way, because everybody could use the code other people produce to create something better.
So I actually think that patents and copyrights in the digital domain are standing in the way of innovation, and that we need actually more innovation really to solve the problems of the world. So we cannot afford, as humanity, to have these obstacles. On the other hand, of course, people who are innovative and creative should be rewarded for the ideas that they produce. So what we need to do is to come up with a system that would reward people automatically for the ideas they produce. So whenever somebody copies your idea, uses it, modifies it, it would basically trigger a transfer of money or whatever to your account. You would be rewarded in some way or another automatically. So what that requires basically is that we determine the innovation genes, right? And I have an idea for a project how to do that automatically and how a system would have to be built in order to reward people automatically for the new ideas and products that they create. So that is the point. So we need to build this.
All right, thank you very much. Please give another very big applause to Dr. Helbing.